Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel AWS DevOps Niche Level. So in this video, we will review some exam questions that we can expect on the S3 service. So if you would have watched my last few videos where I have discussed about some practice exam questions on the SAA-C03 certification exam, in the last video I had pretty much talked about the questions that you can expect for the BAF and the Shield service. So if at all you have not watched that video, you can click the link on the right side of the screen. And in this video, we can discuss few questions that we can expect on the S3 service, right, in the certification exam. So let us go ahead. So let's start with the question number 1. A logistics company plans to automate its order management application. The company wants to use SFTP file transfer in uploading the business critical documents. Since the files are confidential, the files needs to be highly available and must be encrypted at rest. Okay, so you can see here, the files has to be highly available and they have to be encrypted at rest. And again, they are talking about the files, right? So it is pretty much pointing to a S3 service with some additional functionality. The files must also be automatically deleted a month after which they are created. Okay. So with these keywords, what we can infer here? Okay, so what are all the keywords? So they are talking about uploading the files. The files needs to be highly available and it must be encrypted at rest, right? So the files must also be automatically deleted a month after they are created. Okay, so what is a highly available service for storing the files? It is S3, and they're also saying it has to be encrypted at rest. So we need to probably enable the S3 server side encryption or the client side encryption in order to encrypt the data at rest. And when they are saying that the files must also be automatically deleted after a month, then what exactly we need to use within S3? It is the life cycle policy. So we have the S3 life cycle policy, which will automatically migrate the active data that is from the S3 standard bucket to the inactive storage class. Right? So we need to pick up an option where it is typically talking about the S3 based encryption as well as using a life cycle policy. That is a keyword that we have from this question. Right? Now let us go through the choices. So the first choice is create an S3 bucket with encryption enabled, launch an AWS transfer for SFTP endpoint to securely upload the files into the S3 bucket, configure an S3 lifecycle rule to delete the files after a month. So team, basically you see that this option is typically matching with our keywords, right? So they're talking about storing the files in a S3 bucket with encryption enabled, and definitely yes, for the secure transfer using the SFTP, we need to use the AWS transfer for SFTP service. Then configure the S3 lifecycle rule, right? So basically this option, I feel, is having all the the right solution basically to approach this. Okay? But let's go through the other choices as well. So using EFS for enabling the encryption, this is not really going to make sense, right? Because they are talking about a durable service where they can store the files. Similarly, if you see the option number 3, create an S3 bucket with the encryption enabled, configure AWS transfer for SFTP to securely upload files, configure the retention policy on the SFTP server. So you don't really configure the retention policy on the SFTP server, right? If you want to move the files and if you're using S3 as a storage service, you will be setting up a lifecycle policy, right? So this is also eliminated. And provision an EC2 instance and install the SFTP service. No, we will not take this path as well, right? So this is actually leaving to the choice number 1, which is the correct answer. Okay. So enable the encryption on the S3 bucket, then configure a lifecycle rule to delete the files automatically after 1 month. Okay. Now let's go into the second question. So you can see, team, this is the correct answer. Okay, there was an incident in your production environment where the user data stored in the S3 bucket has been accidentally deleted by one of the junior DevOps engineers. The issue was escalated to your manager, and after a few days, you were instructed to improve the security and protection of your AWS resources. So which combination of options will protect the S3 objects in the bucket, okay, from both accidental deletion as well as overwriting? So we need to pick up two functionalities within S3 that will achieve in protecting the objects within the bucket. So what could be those two options? So we have Amazon S3 intelligent tiering, then we have multi-factor authentication delete, enable the versioning, provide access to S3 data strictly through the pre-signed URLs, and disallow S3 delete using the bucket policy. Okay, so which would be the right options here? So S3 intelligent tiering is one of the storage class. If at all you are not really sure of the access patterns of an object within the S3 bucket, we have to go ahead and enable the intelligent tiering. But in this case, this is not really going to serve the purpose here, right? So we are not going to do any protection of the data by enabling the intelligent tiering. So that option is ruled out. Then we have the second option, which is enable multi-factor authentication delete. Yes, we can definitely enable this option in order to give a second layer of authentication for any user who has to delete the object from the S3 bucket, right? And if at all you enable this multi-factor authentication delete, you would be able to delete the object only as a root user, and at the same time you need to use the code of the MFA device what is configured via the root user. So this is one good option that we can consider. And other thing is enable versioning. Yes, very important. And versioning is a feature which will help in accidentally deleting the object, and it will also help to restore the objects by creating a delete marker. That is the reason you have to enable the versioning also. Because once you enable versioning and delete an object from the bucket, what happens is the object will not be permanently deleted. There will be a delete marker which will be created. And by removing the delete marker, you can restore the object. So what would be the correct choice? For this question, it is enabling the multi-factor authentication delete and enabling the versioning, right? So providing access to the S3 data strictly through a pre-signed URL. So again, it is not a direct option to protect the objects within the bucket. Basically, it will enable temporary access for the external users to access your data in the bucket. So this is not going to be applicable in this scenario. Then they'll disallow the S3 delete using the IAM bucket policy, which is also a complicated option. Okay, so enabling the multi-factor authentication delete and enabling the versioning would be the best choices to protect the objects in your S3 bucket. Okay, so I wanted to give some additional information team about enabling the MFA for your bucket. So you can see here, using S3 MFA delete, you can prevent accidental object deletions. If you do not turn on the MFA delete, then anyone with either of the following permissions, a person with the root user privilege, or a person with or a user with a S3 full access permission, it can delete the objects within the S3 bucket. However, if you enable the MFA delete, then you would be able to delete the object from the bucket only as a root user, and also providing the code from the MFA device, whatever you have configured via the root user. So you can see here, these are all the steps we need to follow in order to turn on MFA delete for your bucket. Right? So we need to generate an access key and secret access key for the root user, activate a MFA delete device for the root user, then configure the root credentials in the CLI, then use the put versioning API to turn on the MFA delete feature. Right? So for example, so we can actually use this particular command. Let's say now I have a bucket with the name my demo bucket, right? And if I want to enable the MFA delete, I have already configured the root user credentials in my system. So I just need to enable this or run this command in order to enable the MFA delete, right? So AWS S3 API put bucket versioning, right? So this MFA delete is part of the versioning feature. Then I give the bucket name, then minus versioning configuration. In the versioning configuration, I will specify MFA delete is equal to enabled, right? And then status is enabled. Then I will give the complete ARN of my MFA device and also the code the current code of the MFA device, right? So now, if I want to set the MFA delete for my root user credentials, so what I need to do is I just need to provide a authentication code, current authentication code. Let me try to retrieve that. I have configured the Google Authenticator. So it is 419292. So let me just mention 419292. So now I'm enabling the MFA delete option for my root user. Okay, now you can see that the command executed successfully. Now, if I want to now just check whether the MFA authentication has been enabled for my root user, so I just give this command: AWS S3 API get bucket versioning -- bucket and give the bucket name, right? Okay, now you can see here the status is enabled. MFA delete is also enabled. So this is how you enable the MFA delete option. And MFA delete option has to be enabled only via the CLI. You will not be able to enable it from the GUI. It can be enabled only from the CLI. Okay. So once this is enabled, you will not be able to delete the object with any user. You need to log in as a root user and then use the MFA credentials of the root user, right? Or the MFA device authentication for the root user. Okay. So I hope this has given you some additional details about the MFA delete, right? So for this question, team, the answer will be choice 2 and choice 3. Okay, now let us go ahead with the next option, or the next question. A medical records company is planning to store the sensitive data in S3 with an object level versioning feature enabled. The solution architect is tasked with ensuring that no object can be overwritten. No object can be overwritten or deleted by any user in a period of 1 year only. So this, you can see here, they are given a time limit here. The lock for the objects or the protection for the objects has to be enabled just only for 1 year. Okay. And to meet the strict compliance requirements, the root user of the company's AWS account must also be restricted from making any changes. So even the root user should not be able to make any changes. So what is the most secure way of storing the data in S3? Okay. So in S3, we have a feature called as object lock. Okay. So ideally, we have to go ahead and enable the object lock, but based on the keyword given here, what is that object lock feature that you will enable? So we have enabled S3 object lock in compliance mode with a retention period of 1 year. S3 object lock in compliance mode with a legal hold of 1 year. S3 object lock in governance mode with a retention period of 1 year. S3 object lock in governance mode with a legal hold of 1 year. So now you can see, based on this keyword, where even the root user of the AWS account should not have permission, then definitely we have to go for compliance mode, because compliance mode will restrict the edit of the objects for all the users, including the root user. You need to remember that. Okay. So definitely governance mode will give permissions for the root user to edit the objects within the bucket or delete it with the bucket. But if you enable compliance mode, even the root user will not have permissions. So we can straight away neglect these choices 3 and 4. Now the answer should be either choice 1 or choice 2. Now let's see the choice 1. They enable S3 object in compliance mode with a retention period of 1 year. And you can see here, they are given the time period also. So in this case, if there is a specific time limit to protect the objects, then we need to select the object lock in compliance mode with the retention period option. So this is the correct answer. Okay, but if at all they have not given any time limit, they want to put the hold on the objects unless and until they give a time frame or later. Then in that case, you have to go for a legal hold. Okay, but if they give a specific time period of 1 year only, then definitely you can go for the retention period of 1 year. Okay, so ideally, choice 1 is the correct answer. Enable S3 object lock in compliance mode with a retention period of 1 year. Okay. Okay, now let's go into the next question, team. So you can see this is the answer. Compliance mode and retention period. Okay, let us see this question. A company collects atmospheric data such as temperature, air pressure, and humidity from different countries. Each site location is equipped with various weather instruments at a high-speed internet connection. Right, the average collected data in each location is around 500 GB and will be analyzed by a weather forecasting application hosted in North Virginia. As a solution architect, you need to aggregate all the data in the fastest way. So what is the keyword here? Fastest way. Okay, and basically it is basically across the globe, right? Different countries. So what is the option you will select here? So whenever you see fastest way, we can actually point our answer to the S3 transfer acceleration service. Okay, S3 transfer acceleration, because this transfer acceleration is going to leverage the edge locations to deliver the content to various users based on the location from which the request is coming from. Okay, so let's see the option where the transfer acceleration is there. If you see, that option is in the second choice, right? Enable transfer acceleration in the destination bucket and upload the collected data using multi-part uploads. Yes. So even if you want to complete your object upload process at a much faster way, you can even go for multi-part uploads. You can split the object into multiple pieces and you can go for a multi-part upload. So that is the reason the choice 2 is correct here. Okay, because if you look at the other options, setting up a cross-region replication and copy the objects, this is going to be a tedious process, and secondly, it's not really going to be a fastest way of achieving this, because cross-region replication is a asynchronous replication. There is going to be a delay, right? So we are not going to go for this. Setting up a VPN connection is also not going to make sense just for this requirement. And also, snowball in general, you will use it for a huge amount of data. In the range of petabytes, right? But here they are just talking about 500 GB of data, right? So the answer is typically pointing to choice 2. That is, you have to enable transfer acceleration in the destination bucket and upload the collected data using multi-part uploads. So let's move into the next question. A travel photo sharing website is using Amazon S3 to serve high quality photos to visitors of your website. After a few days, you found out that there are several other travel websites linking and using your photos. This resulted in financial losses for your business. What is the most effective method to mitigate this issue? Right? So how can you restrict access for your objects within your bucket? So using a S3 bucket, so let's go through the choice 2 and 3, 2, 3, 4 first. Use CloudFront distributions for your photos. So you can use CloudFront distributions for your photos, but how are you protecting the data? You're not using any object origin access identity, right? Typically, if you're using origin access identity, then this would make some sense, but we are not using that. They're just saying use the CloudFront distribution. So this option is ruled out. Store and privately serve the high quality photos on Amazon Work Docs instead. No, this service is not applicable for this scenario. Block the IP addresses of the offending websites using NACL. Again, NACL is typically only at the network layer. At the subnet layer, you can block the traffic, not at the application layer, right? So this is also ruled out. So which is the best option here? Based on the elimination technique, we can see that we are left with choice number 1, and that is a correct answer also, right? So configure your S3 bucket to remove the public read access. Yes, we need to make the bucket private. We have to remove the public read access and use pre-signed URLs with the expiry dates. Yes, very safe option. Because if you configure a pre-signed URL, you can give a time limit. So how long that URL has to be valid. Maybe you can give an expiry time as 5 minutes, or maybe you can give 60 seconds. Okay, so once that expiry time is elapsed, then nobody will be able to access your URL. So that is the reason we have to typically go with the pre-signed URL giving an expiration time period, and also you need to remove the public read access on the S3 bucket. So this is the correct answer. Okay, so I can show you that in the console. So if I go to the S3 bucket, so let's say I have an object here. So this is the object. If I want to generate a pre-signed URL for this object, I can go to actions and I can click, you can see here, share with a pre-signed URL. So if I click that, here it is telling you to enter the number of minutes, okay, after which this link will be expiring. So I can actually give maybe 1 minute or 5 minutes here, right? And once I give the expiration time, then I can say create a pre-signed URL. Then I can copy this pre-signed URL and put it in the browser here. And you can see that there will be an approved token also in the pre-signed URL. And that token is going to be just valid for 5 minutes. You can see this, the token here. Okay. So this is very secure because after the timeline, the expiration timeline, nobody will be able to access the content in your bucket. Okay. So that is the reason we have to go with this option. Okay, remove the public read access and then use the pre-signed URLs with expiry dates. Okay, now let us go to the next question. A solution architect is trying to enable cross-region replication to an S3 bucket, but this option is disabled. Which of the following option is a valid reason for this? Why this cross-region replication option is disabled? So these are all the choices. So in order to use the cross-region replication feature within S3, you need to enable versioning on the bucket. So that itself is a correct answer, right? Because cross-region replication is basically copying of the objects between the buckets across two different regions. Okay, and for that replication to work, you need to enable versioning. That is a prerequisite, right? Enabling the versioning is a prerequisite for your cross-region replication to work. That is why this is the correct answer. Okay, all other options are not making much sense. So straight away you can select the option that you have to enable the versioning on the bucket, which is a prerequisite for the cross-region replication. Okay, so the choice is 1. Okay, all objects uploaded on the S3 bucket must be encrypted for security compliance. The bucket will use server-side encryption with the S3 managed encryption keys to encrypt the data using 256-bit advanced encryption standard. Which of the following request headers must be used? Right, so if at all you want to enable it from the command line, what is a request header? You have to use it. So it's very straightforward. We're talking about the S3's, the server-side encryption, right? Basically, the S3 managed encryption keys. So you can see here, this is the one which is matching that XAMZ server-side encryption. Because here it is talking about customer algorithm, customer master keys, and customer key using MD5. No, here they're talking with the S3 managed encryption key. So straight away, you can select this option. XAMZ server-side encryption. That is a request header that you will be using it. Okay. So the correct answer is choice 1. Okay, an online medical system hosted in AWS stores sensitive personally identifiable information of users in the S3 bucket. Both the master keys and unencrypted data. So both the master keys and unencrypted data should never be sent to AWS. This is the key word. The master keys and unencrypted data should never be sent to AWS in order to comply with the strict compliance and regulatory requirements of the company, right? So now what are all the choices? So which S3 encryption technique should the architect use? So use a S3 client-side encryption with a AWS KMS key. Use a client-side encryption with a client-side master key. Use a server-side encryption with a KMS key and server-side encryption with a customer-provided key. So team, if you use a server-side encryption, obviously you will have to transfer your unencrypted data as to the AWS. Okay, so definitely we have to eliminate these two options. Now let us come to the client-side encryption. So if you are using a client-side encryption with an AWS KMS key, in order to decrypt your data, again you need to provide the KMS key on the destination to decrypt the data. So that way you are still sending the KMS key to AWS. So you want to avoid this also. Okay, then how do you manage this? Use the client-side encryption with a client-side master key. This is the best option here. Okay, and that is the correct answer also. Okay, in order to achieve this, where they are saying that both the master keys and unencrypted data should never be sent to AWS. This is possible only when you use a client-side encryption also with a client-side master key. So if you enable a client-side master key, then both your unencrypted data as well as the keys will not be sent to AWS. Okay, but if you are selecting the option, the keys that are managed by AWS, then this condition is not going to be satisfied. That is the reason we have to go for client-side encryption at the same time using a client-side master key. Okay, I hope this is clear why this option is the correct answer. Okay, fine. You can see some description here. Client-side encryption is the act of encrypting data before sending it to S3. To enable the client-side encryption, we have two options here. Either you can use a KMS key, AWS KMS key, or the client-side master key. But when using a KMS key to enable the client-side encryption, you provide an AWS KMS key identifier to AWS. Okay, so that's why we have not selected the option with KMS key. We went with the option of client-side encryption using a client-side master key, because when you are using client-side master key for client-side data encryption, your client-side master keys and your unencrypted data are never sent to AWS. Right? So that is why we selected this option. Okay. I hope this has given you additional clarity. Okay. So yeah, I think that's all I had for this video. I just wanted to share a few questions around S3. Or probably, you might get questions with a similar pattern in the examination also. I just thought of reviewing this and hope this content was helpful. So if you like this content and if you found it useful, you can even share it with your known circles. So thank you for your time again, and I will meet you shortly in another video where I will take up another service and we will go through the examination pattern question for that service.